Sahana Vavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahe Tejasvinavadhitamastu Mahavidvishavahe. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May we be nurtured together. May we be nourished together. May we strive together. May our learning shine. May we not quarrel. Peace. In the next two verses, 27 to 28, Krishna will be speaking about Dhyana Palam, the benefit of meditation, and it's going to answer again or help the mind to understand what's the purpose of doing this consistently. What's the point of persisting? This is a standard phenomena of human beings. We unfortunately or fortunately need some reasons to persist because life easily takes over, it defaults. So the Dhyana Palam is the fruit of meditation, and if we remember, meditation in Vedanta does not specifically mean just sitting down in the corner or at a particular place. It also includes focusing the mind upon the teaching whenever it is free, like waiting in the line at the post office, or driving back home, or even vacuuming the house, or even gardening, or even waiting at some line, or even in a bathroom, like a shower. So many opportunities in life provide us this meditation that Vedanta prescribes. So the benefit that Krishna is now going to say, that is the highest fruit of meditation, is, if we use a common phrase, and it's a really descriptive phrase, which says, peace that passeth all understanding. That's a very descriptive statement to describe the benefit of meditation. So what this means is, the benefit is the kind of peace that surpasses or is beyond understanding of the human mind. That does not mean that it is out of the human mind, because we also described last week that Atma is the all-pervading consciousness, which also pervades the very mind of every individual. So, peace that passeth all understanding means that on one hand, it is beyond understanding of the intellect. That means it cannot be quantified. But at the same time, the irony is, the very self, the only place, in quotes, place, where the self can be known is in the intellect. So it is not that it is beyond the mind, it is pervading the mind. All it means is that the intellect's understanding is aligned with the reality of what is. So what this means is, suppose that a person has a notion about life, and this notion is out of alignment with the total. So this is going to produce conflict, because they're going to encounter life where it doesn't suit them. The harmony breaks down. So the peace that passeth all understanding is simply living in harmony with the knowledge of, or as told in Vedanta. Okay? So it just means that you are in alignment consistently, unceasingly with the Shastra, with the scriptures. And the result of this is the highest contentment that can be gained in all lives put together. Because all of the contentment that we receive is based on a short arrival-departure basis. So this means that the contentment that we're speaking of is not subject to arrival and departure. Once it's discovered, it never, or it cannot leave, because you cannot leave. You are Atman. Thus, Atman's nature is contentment. So when Atman is known, thus the result is the natural expression is cheerfulness. That means the character is cheerful generally in life. We don't mean that the character is not going to have a big smile at the funeral when everyone else is sad. We're being realistic. They understand that there is a death of a human being and it's time to have sympathy when it's time to have sympathy, but it does not touch them in a way that it touches a worldly person. So what this means is they are only there to be part of the environment, but they're not making it more than it deserves to be. For example, if somebody dies, then we start to think, oh, one day I also will die. Oh, how short is life? Oh, how unfair is everything? So a wise person will still show sympathy, but they're not going to make more of it than it deserves. This is why I say they are aligned with what is. What this means is they do not put additional meaning onto the world. Okay, so we'll start with the word Sukham Uttamam Upaiti, because that's going to open up the conversation. Sukham Uttamam Upaiti. So Sukham is happiness or peace, and Uttamam is excellent. So the person is privileged, the jnani, we're speaking of a wise person, is privileged to the greatest peace that one can gain, as I've already said. So this means that a jnani enjoys highest contentment that is available. So I did not say highest excitement. I said just general contentment. Contentment is a good word because it does not imply anything that is extravagant, nor does it induce an image in the mind to imagine how a wise person is. So contentment just means generally happy with things as they are. So we can also break this down, this contentment, highest that is, into two categories. The first one is unconditional happiness, and the second is conditional happiness. And now we will quickly take a look at both of them and explore what they mean. So, when I say unconditional happiness, I'll ask you a question and then you answer me. If you were to ask fire, hey fire, why are you hot? What's fire going to reply?
Because I am my nature.
Yeah. Fire replies, because I can't help myself. That's who I am. I can't be away from my nature of hotness. That means I'm unconditionally hot, says the fire. Unconditionally means it does not depend on anything to be hot other than itself. That's what unconditionally means. Which means there is no conditions for the fire to be hot. The fire is helplessly hot. So the fire's nature is hot. It means that the fire does not depend on anything else to be hot. Hotness is the nature of the self, of the fire. Okay, so the self of fire is hotness. And the fire can never be away from that. Even if the fire thinks it's away from that, the truth is the fire's self, nature, is hotness. Now, the second example is if we take conditional happiness. So I'm going to ask a question again. Suppose you ask water, "Hey, water, why are you hot?" What does water reply?
Because of the sun.
Because of, you understand?
Yeah.
So if we ask water, "Hey, water, why are you hot?" The water replies, answers please. Because of the heat source. So the heat source is external, that is, giving or providing the water its borrowed attribute called hotness. So this means that the attribute of hotness of the water is borrowed from elsewhere. Thus, it is conditionally hot. So what this means is that when this borrowed attribute, hotness, expires, the water will return to its what? Intrinsic nature, its inherent nature, which is coolness. So this means that the water was hot conditionally based on a borrowed attribute of something else. So this is what we call conditional happiness. So this means that a person who is conditionally happy is only happy as long as the attribute which is making them happy is being borrowed from the source which is providing that attribute. When the source stops giving that happiness, the person of worldly nature will go right along with the expiration of that joy. So that would then lead to what? The other side of the coin is dukkam, suffering. So this is a cycle of constant conditional happiness and unhappiness. Whereas the fire, because it is unconditionally happy, it cannot help itself but to remain as it is. So, the lesson is, Vedanta says, anything that is conditional is fake. Anything that was borrowed from elsewhere, from someone, at some point in time, because of some activity, because of some knowledge acquired, because of some friend, because of some partner, because of some important person, whatever is borrowed and wasn't there before means what? When it ultimately expires, then the other side of the coin will show and demonstrate its full glory as intensely as the happiness has provided, which is suffering. So, the worldly person subscribes to short joys of happiness in different circumstances, whereas a wise person understands that worldly joys have their place, but understands the limitation of short bursts of joys gained through different exposures, different time, different place. So for that reason, the wise person does not discard worldly pleasures because they have their own usefulness whenever they do show up, only that the wise person understands the ultimate limitation which it will provide once it is expired. For that reason, the wise person does not put as much intensity and glorification into worldly joys. So, we also said that the fire is unconditionally hot. So, translating this to a wise person, jnani that is unconditionally cheerful. Not clown cheerfulness with a big smile for no reason, but generally cheerful. Why? Go back 2 sessions ago. Because of knowledge. From whence is Jnani's Ananda originating from? The answer is from one's knowledge that, quote, I am eternal, I can never die, I am immortal, because of Jnani's purnaha, purnatvam, fullness. One is full. By the way, when I say I'm referring to you. Okay, so don't think that I'm referring to Andre, I'm referring to you. We also said that knowledge does not go with time or space as opposed to emotions, because 2 plus 2 is 4 on earth. Is 2 plus 2 still 4 in heaven? Yeah, you better believe it. Is 2 plus 2 the same in Brahmaloka, Swarga? Whatever dimension you go to, with whatever civilization you happen to be with, at any time, 2 plus 2 equals 4 will never change, unless the person is superimposing their own lack of knowledge onto the 4, thus changing the number 4 into something which it is not. As good as the superimposition of the hotness being put onto the water, whereby the water takes pride in its hotness, and yet the hotness only belongs to the fire, and yet the water fails to address that. Thus the water suffers when its hotness expires. So 2 plus 2 is still 4 when we all die. So in the same manner, the formula, the equation of self, of who one is and who one is not, does not change when circumstances in life strike, whether they are of whatever intensity, higher or lower intensity. That means any kind of excitement does not touch the jnani. Why? Because 2 plus 2 equals 4 never changes. The house burns down, it still does not touch the jnani. Why? Because the answer still has not changed. That's the power of knowledge. This is where we can actually say the power of knowledge is unsurpassed. Okay. Now, the question is going to come up, and it's going to say, what type of jnani enjoys this kind of unconditional cheerfulness? Because we're still talking about sukham uttamam. The answer is the type of person who struggled like crazy into what? Into the knowledge, into the nature of the self. Like with anything in life, the more we put time and effort into that which matters, the better and more clear and more proficient we are at it. Which means that nididhyasanam is what? Putting a lot of time and effort into this work. Why? Because if you take any worldly activity, the most successful ladies and gentlemen in that field of endeavor are the ones who sincerely put a lot of work, more than anyone else. And they found the inner strength to continue doing so without losing motivation out of worldly circumstances which constantly pull them back into samsara. Which means it's your job to constantly remind yourself, why should I continue doing this? Okay. We also said such person struggles. It is a struggle. That is an honest statement. Everything is a struggle in this world because it consumes energy, time, and effort. But it is worth it. Why? What's the initial statement? Sukham uttamam, the greatest contentment that can be gained. We said also last week, how is this done? Like building a house or restructuring the house, we what? Destroy it and then put the bricks together again, brick by brick, to create a more efficient house, one that has a quality of life improvement in overall, which means thought by thought needs to be looked at as to what it means and how to look at it in a way that does not discourage but rather encourages and uplifts one in a manner of gratitude rather than a manner of regrets. So that means the thought is to be looked at until you can come to appreciate the thought. And when you have come to appreciate the thought, what does this mean? It is time to let that thought go. Why? Because you have taken the time to look at it sufficiently. If it comes back, that is when you can discard it as anatma. Before that, we cannot do that because that's called denial of thoughts. You understand? So, formula is, if a thought keeps coming back over and over, do not deny it, do not ignore it, address it. Because that thought is coming for a reason. The only thoughts that come right now are the ones that have not been sufficiently addressed to the point where they're no longer holding power over the individual's emotions and thoughts. So this means thought comes, address it. What does addressing mean? Look at it from a different angle. What else can I see about this? What have I missed? In what other ways can I see this as to cause me to appreciate this thought? What can I learn from this thought? What may I be avoiding from this? In what other ways can I look at this to help me to grow and expand? Take the time, brick by brick, at least 5 to 10 minutes per thought. When you are decently happy, then make a verbal statement. It's time to let the thought go. From then on, if the thought comes back, and I promise you it will, you know why? What's the nature of the mind? Habit. So there's a habit for the thought to come back. Because you've already addressed it, now you can say, you know what, I've already addressed the thought, it's now come back, I can now dismiss it as not self. It's an object known to me, the subject. Is that clear, the formula?
Yeah, okay. But can I ask a question? How does one know which thoughts to then act on and which to discard?
You know what thoughts to act on, as long as if you were to act on them, it will bring you peace. So, this does not now mean, okay, now I need to go and retaliate, because the aftermath of retaliation is what? Anything other than peace. So, how do I need to address the thoughts or do something about them? You've got two options. Either something physically, an expression physically, go to someone and say sorry or something, or the other way is to look at them in the moment, wherever you happen to be, and look at it in a way as to diffuse it. That's two options. So that's up to you. Now, which ones to discard? The ones that you have already addressed sufficiently. So if you already looked at your thoughts about parents, for example, enough, and they just keep coming back again, then you can just look at them from the light of appreciation. I have addressed this. There's not much I can do about this. Okay, otherwise what happens is we constantly stick in this pattern of trying to address worldly thoughts, and we get stuck in our own head of anatma thoughts. So, the summary so far is, such a person with sukham uttamam is peacefully old, young, bold, sick, healthy, man, woman, thin, not so thin, peacefully, whatever you want to fill in. That's the benefit. Peacefully, whatever it is. Peacefully poor, peacefully rich, peacefully smart, peacefully not so smart. The peacefully does not change. The adjective or the noun changes. Okay. Now, such a person's mind, that is a jnani's mind, a wise person's mind, is free from unhealthy thought processes. Prashanta manasam. The first word there, prashanta manasam. Free from unhealthy thought processes. Why is this person free? Because they have taken the time. Who's taken the time? The aspiring student, to handle and address every single thought which was coming out of without their permission. It was arising, thus they took the time to address it, and then they let it go. So as a result of having done that, they are what? Prashanta manasam, free from unhealthy thoughts. So we're not talking about thoughtlessness, by the way, because thoughts are not samsara. If they were samsara, then even this will now be entanglement. Thoughts are only samsara if they are burdensome to your mind. What does burdensome mean? They are entangling. They cause me to be entangled in a situation that the mind is undergoing. Whereas a mind whose thoughts are of sattvic nature, godly nature, pure nature, compassionate nature, are not disturbing, they are not samsarish, they are the thoughts that everyone would actually appreciate because they bring what? Peacefully fill in the blank. Okay. So we also are not interested in discarding thoughts or being thoughtless, as I said, because all we have in form is thoughts alone. So we cannot get rid of thoughts. We cannot get rid of thoughts. We can only replace burdensome thoughts with peaceful, sattvic, pure, kind, holy, saintly thoughts. So Vedanta is not about having an empty mind. It is about appreciating that the fact that the mind has been given to entertain thoughts of what? Atma Swarupa, the thoughts of one's nature. Now, how does one enjoy Sukham Uttamam, a mind that is free and thus has no unhealthy thoughts? The answer is Shanta Rajasam. Shanta Rajasam. The answer is by removing Rajasic Vrtihi. Vrtihi means thoughts. Thoughts like what? Greed, jealousy, anger, impatience. Give me one. Revenge. Give me another one. I said?
Jealousy.
Attachment, delusion.
What about excitement?
If the excitement is over excessive, then it's as good as something that is nature of suffering. Because how long can you remain excited? Not very long.
No.
Fame.
Fame also need to be seen, need to be known, need to be someone important in the society, need to make a difference. Okay, there is a difference between making a difference. There is a difference between making a difference and the need to make a difference. The need to make a difference is unnatural. Finding yourself in a situation where you're making a difference, that is natural. For example, a mom and dad, they just find themselves in a situation with a child. That's natural.
But wouldn't these greed, anger, these would be tamasic thoughts? Wouldn't they be considered as tamasic thoughts, not rajasic?
Yeah, they're both. They're always a mixture. Wherever there is rajas, there is tamas. They're intertwined, inseparable. Okay, so we're removing these rajasic vrtihi, these thoughts that are exciting, excessively exciting. And how do we do this? The answer is nididhyasanam, which means what? reorienting, re-looking at one's thoughts, thought by thought, like the house of bricks. In the light of what? Vedantic teaching.
Is the converse true as well in terms of mind numbing? Thoughts that can just make you go into a sort of numbing state?
Thoughts that are numbing are tamasic. For that reason, we prescribe karma yoga to get a person out of the numbness in order to be a little bit more excited about life. Otherwise, a numbing thought is a thought of inertia, which is a quality of tamas, which causes a person to have no motivation to even get out into the world. Okay, so there's a stage from numbness to excitement to sattva, that is peace. But you cannot go from numbness to peace because you're not going to have energy to even sit down in meditation. Okay, so the point is, remember to look at your thoughts one by one. It is a struggle and it's good. It is time and it is effort. And it has to be done compulsorily. Okay, so we're not, otherwise we are what? Ignoring thoughts, denying them, because they don't feel good. And that is not how to live a life, by denying just because it doesn't feel good.
Does it have to be a struggle? I mean, if you enjoy doing it.
Struggle is a good word. It's not a struggle, but at the same time, I'm putting that word because, you know, to make it reality, right? It will be, it is hard work. It is hard work. Okay. We don't want to, you know, spice it up too much. So in Vedantic meditation, remember, Nididhyasanam is not necessarily restricted to closed eyes. What is compulsory is investigation, analysis of every thought, thought by thought. That is compulsory in Nididhyasanam. So what is Nididhyasanam?
Examining our thoughts.
One by one. Even walking on the beach for Vedanta is meditation. Why? Because walking on the beach means what? You're usually alone, or maybe you're taking your dog out, and it's very relaxing. You know, you have time to think. So this means that doing some nature walk or beach walk, it gives you a lot of time to inquire into common thoughts and to investigate their nature. Remember, whatever one resists, persists. That's a common law. So whatever thoughts persist in my mind automatically tells me that I am resisting them. Whatever one resists, persists in life. If you thus wish it to not keep persisting, what do? Stop resisting. How do we stop resisting? By taking a walk on the beach or in the forest and thinking about the thoughts which keep coming up. Okay, so once again in summary, what is Vedantic meditation called Nididhyasanam? Investigation into every thought which leads to transformation of thought processes. Our life is nothing but what? Thoughts put together. That's what your life is in summary. One thought following the next. So thus the quality of thoughts is what? The quality of life. So how do I improve the quality of life? By looking at my thoughts and improving the quality of them. How? By looking at them in the light of the light. Vedantic light, that is. Okay. Finally, Brahma Bhutam, such person who has performed this successfully becomes one with Brahman. Now, what does this mean, to become one with Brahman? It simply means that instead of entertaining anatma thoughts and constantly giving them reality, one has learned to automatically shift the attention onto what? The self. But you can only do that how? After having investigated the anatma thoughts. You see the process?
So-
First investigate, and then you can let them go and dismiss them as objects known to me, the subject.
So in that way, thoughts are quite helpful. You need them to know yourself.
Absolutely.
So it doesn't matter how bizarre the thought,
Yeah.
you've got to accept it for what it is,
Like,
but
this
then
is
flip it
great.
into nidhyasana.
Even dreams, if you remember dreams, you're probably lucky. And only in the dreams sometimes some of the most bizarre circumstances come. So how does one transform their life through the power of dreams? If you remember them, when you wake up, look at that like any other thought, nididhyasanam, and do what? Forgive that thought. I am sorry for doing whatever I did that caused this conflict. Please release me from this. There is not a single thing in this world that can go by without it not being useful. In other words, if you make use of it by investigating into it, at least giving it some attention, by itself, that alone will empower the individual to what? Have a quality of life that is worth living. Now, verse 28. Yunjan evam sadatmanam yogi vigata kalmashaha sukhena brahma samsparsham atyantam sukham ashnute. Verse 28 is the same idea as verse 27. It just continues it in a different approach. Atyantam sukham ashnute. Atyantam sukham ashnute, the last three words. This is equivalent to sukham uttamam from the previous verse. In other words, contentment which has no higher than itself. Independent contentment. So, this is talking about the condition of a wise person, a jnani, which says that a wise person has ananda, purnatvam. Ananda is general cheerfulness. Purnatvam, fullness, or shanti, which is peace in one's life, has contentment. Now, how does the person have this kind of contentment? The answer is by removing habitual, unconscious habit patterns, obstacles in meditation, which by their presence obstruct, restrict, or steal one's contentment. What steals one's contentment? The obstacles. And what are obstacles? Thoughts which keep arising on and on. What does this mean? Meditation does not produce ananda. Meditation does not and cannot produce contentment. So then, what does produce contentment? The answer is jnanam. Knowledge produces the contentment. Automatically. Because knowledge says that I am already full. So you first have to learn that and see what it means to say I am already full. And how do we do that? Through shravanam, by listening to the nature of the self, through knowledge alone. Yes, Martin?
I was going to say, knowledge of self is what we're talking about, not knowledge per se as information.
No, not data,
Yeah.
not data. Assimilated knowledge. It is so. It is the reality. Okay. Now I want to get back to the statement and say, meditation does not produce contentment. Here's a metaphor. Imagine there's a tap. What's inside the tap? Water. But the water is not flowing. Why is it not flowing? Because there is a closure. It's closed. So the water, so that means what? When I open the tap, the water automatically flows. Why does it automatically flow? Because the nature of flow is to flow. So Bhagavan's law of gravity is pulling down the water. So all I have to do is what? Open the tap, remove the restriction from the water flowing. And when I remove the restriction, the water, which is what? Ananda, naturally flows. I did not pull the water down. I did not create the water. The water was already there all along from the beginning. All the aspiring student Vedantin did was what? Open the tap, remove the obstacle preventing the Ananda from being known and appreciated as myself. So the flow is the Ananda, the flow of water. And how is this Ananda discovered? By self-knowledge. Because think about it this way. How many taps do we have in the world? They all provide Ananda, don't they? Yeah. But they're all short-lived Anandas, right? So we see so many taps, but we don't know which one to go to. So we kind of try this tap, we get a little bit of Ananda, drink, enjoy. It doesn't last. So to discover the limitless Ananda tap, the one that keeps flowing, we need for that what? Knowledge. We need to be told how to discover it. That's why we say the first step is knowledge. Without the knowledge, I will keep wondering, where do I find myself? And how do I find myself? So now, after self-knowledge, despite finding the tap of limitless Ananda, it still does not flow. Why? What do we say in the beginning? Because the tap is closed. What does closure mean? Unconscious habitual patterns preventing the flow of one's full appreciation as eternal, limitless, non-dual love, consciousness. So what does this mean? One has to remove the obstacle preventing the flow of Ananda as myself. That's why we can still assimilate this knowledge and know very clearly I am the unchanging and everything else is changing. But that's it. Is that it? I don't experience or have much benefit as expounded by the scriptures. Why? The answer is because the tap is closed. Now, how is this transformation brought about? Like physiotherapy. Physiotherapy is slow, movement by movement, repetitive. Suppose you come to a doctor and you need some help. What does a physiotherapist do? They move your arm or hand or wrist, whatever, back and forth, on and on and on, right? Not just once, they keep doing it. And because in a specialized way, of course. And because they do it in a specialized way, what is this? And what? Repetitive? It does what? It helps you. In the same way, how is this flow discovered? Like physiotherapy. Slow work, time-consuming, it is, but it is the highest purpose of human birth. So it is no excuse to put away. Okay. Now, who attains this sukham uttamam, this greatest contentment? The answer is yogi. Yogi is one in this context who has, as I said, taken the quality time to investigate one's thoughts, thought by thought. It was a struggle, yes it was, but it was worth it. And because it was worth it, the yogi then gets to appreciate one's fullness. How is this done? Yunjan evam sadatmanam. The first two words. The answer is by reorienting or regulating the mind thought by thought. Repeatedly, like physiotherapy. So it all goes back to the same answer. It is repetitive, it is time-consuming, it is requiring quality time on your part. And then what will happen? The answer is vigata kalmashaha, the last word there, meaning what? The unhealthy habits, thoughts, gradually come down, not instantaneously. If there's an idea that one day nothing's okay, and the next day after some kind of knowledge, I'm liberated and a big light bulb is shining, that is incorrect thinking. Nothing happens instantaneously in nature. And if it does, why is that? Because prior work went into it. Suppose you're working for your corporation, your institution, and after years of struggle, over delivery, you get what? An award. Is that award as a result of one-time effort? That reward is the result of what? Consistent, persistent, non-stop, unceasing effort to over-deliver, to give it your best to the whole. In the same manner, this is no different. So one is gradually freed from unhealthy thinking, and we use two words in previous sessions. We call them viparita bhavana or viparyaya. This means unhealthy habits in Sanskrit. So the instruction for what we have said so far would be like this. Whenever you have free time for yourself, whether walking or sitting or meditating alone or waiting in line, ask yourself, am I missing something in my life? Whatever answer comes means what? I need to ask, why do I find myself missing this, considering my nature is fullness? Is there something that I am not at peace with in my life? If the answer is yes, it means I am giving importance and reality to that object, and I need to what? Look at it in a different way until I become at peace with it. Am I missing something? Is there something missing right now in me? Whatever the answer is, thought by thought, nididhyasanam, look into it. It does take quality time to do so. Is there anything that reoccurs in my experience on a repetitive basis? Whether it's a feeling of a negative nature, suppose lack of confidence, or incompetency, or confusion, or I'm not good enough, or I'm too old for this, or this is not my path. Whatever it is, your job, your duty to yourself is to inquire into that very thought. Because that one thought is what's able to take the person back into the samsara. This means one needs to be strict with themselves. Our issue is we are too easy on ourselves and we think, okay, I have a job, I have family, I'm safe. And this is very easy to fall into this pattern where everything is okay, but in reality it is the very thinking of thinking that everything's okay that postpones one's questioning process called nididhyasanam, leading to what? Sukham uttamam, meaning what? Contentment which is unsurpassed by anything in existence, which is you, yourself. Who does not want fullness of themselves? Nobody. Nobody wants partiality. We all want totality, fullness, wholeness. How do we gain this? By looking every thought by thought. Is this hard? No. Why not? Anything gradual cannot be hard. How do you get overwhelmed? Tell me, replicate a process for me of getting overwhelmed. Very easy. To get overwhelmed, all you have to do is look at the big picture and see it so high above there And in comparison to where I'm at, I am so far. And I get so discouraged and overwhelmed that I stop. Is this hard? No. Why? Because I only proceed with what feels and is right for me in the next step. I never go 2 steps or 3 steps ahead. If I do, overwhelm guaranteed $1 million. How does a person get overwhelmed in business? They look at a competitor who is $2 million ahead of them, and they're $2 million behind, and they think, I now have to catch up, and that discourages the person. How does one get discouraged in the field of any endeavor? By looking at the best and then thinking, I am not there and I've got so much work to do. So what do? You step back and you say, what one aspect do I appreciate about it that I can start working on? Just one small aspect. Is this hard? No. Why? Because it is supposed to be done gradually. If it's done fast, it is unnatural. Again, from where does this ananda come from? This is going to be answered in Brahma Samsparsham. Where does this ananda come from? The answer is, quote, contact with Brahman. Contact with the self as a result of removal of the obstructions. I said quote, so now don't say that's Advaita that I said contact. So this ananda comes from not the world, it comes from the self. Unconditionally, the fire is hot. It's helplessly hot. In the same manner, the nature of the self is fullness, which translates into human emotion as contentment. Everything's okay, everything's fine, nothing to worry about. So, how is this ananda born? The answer is through consistent association with self. What do we do as worldly types? Consistently associate with what? Worldly objects. And what is worldly objects? Arrival, departure. Thus we are always what? Skipping on to the next object, looking for another hit. Whereas self, the flow of ananda, is permanent. Thus, if I constantly associate myself with myself, then I discover in myself, as myself, that which is full, which no worldly object, no worldly thing, no worldly person, no experience can ever match. Because fullness means what? No experience in this earth or any planet is excluded from that fullness. Thus, what is there to give more than what is already all-encompassing, all-inclusive, which is you? That's why we call it Sukham Uttamam. Now, question, does this mean that a jnani is not allowed to experience worldly joys? The answer is, Shastra does not ban what's called Vishaya Ananda. Vishaya means subject or object Ananda. The Shastra does not ban you from appreciating worldly enjoyments, but there is a condition. As long as your transactions or engagements with the world are dharmic. If they are adharmic, in that sense, it would be, quote, banned from a Vedantic standpoint. If they are dharmic, that means I only wish the best for the object which I'm transacting with, then absolutely okay. However, there's another condition. Brahmananda, the joy the cheerfulness of the self, once discovered, that is that tap, once it's been discovered, what do we say about who you are? Fullness. So what happens, ironically, is when the fullness is fully discovered and owned up to, remember the word owned up to? Is owned up to, what is fullness, wholeness? That means nothing in the world can offer self, you, more contentment than you already are. So the irony is, the Shastra does not ban a jnani or anyone from engaging in worldly transactions. However, the irony is, once the knowledge of self, fullness, has been fully discovered, then one has no interest in the world. Because how can one have an interest in the world if the worldly objects are not excluded from the fullness that I am, that you are? That's the irony of it. Now, revision time. We have now done verse 27 and verse 28, which talked about dhyanam palam, the fruit of meditation, thought by thought, quality time investment. Now, the revision is, Krishna is talking about the benefit of Vedantic meditation, and the benefit is gained by dwelling constantly on the Vedantic teaching until this teaching is fully assimilated. Fully assimilated means it is so. It is the reality. It is a fact. It is an unverbalized, unspoken reality that needs not be even discussed because it is the case. So, that is what it means to have fully assimilated Vedanta and translated into a living reality. Now, meaning what? Once it's assimilated, it becomes my personality. So your personality is of the scriptures. How do you gain a scriptural personality? Thought by thought investigation and nididhyasana, meaning what? Every thought is looked at in the light of what I have heard. It is all panchamahabhuta, 5 great elements, arising out of what? Maya. And Maya is a power in Brahman. So what? Brahman is the truth of the entire world. So thus, such a student sees everything as that one consciousness which pervades the entire universe. So the question is going to come, what is an indication that you have assimilated this knowledge? There's an indicator, and it's a guaranteed indicator.
Smile.
The indicator is you do not forget the teaching in worldly transactions. You do not forget this. The intensity of your knowledge does not decrease while engaging with worldly transactions. A baby cries, needs attention. Something happens, a cup breaks, your favorite cup which your grandmother gave you. The knowledge in those circumstances does not get forgotten. It cannot get forgotten because you cannot forget yourself. Now, what is a guaranteed indicator that the knowledge has not been well ascertained? Yeah, good one. You react to things. You react how? According to previous reactions. In other words, I haven't really changed anything. I went to the Vedanta class, I heard what I should do, and yet my reactions still continue according to what? My old personality. What is the whole point of Vedanta? Life transformation, meaning what? A transformation coherent with the personality that is supposed to arise as a result of ascertaining and assimilating the Vedantic teachings. If there is a reaction according to how I used to react, it means what? I have not invested quality time called nididhyasanam into the teaching given to me in class or through the Shastra. This also means that one can easily, we're still on the indicator of not assimilated, one can easily present this to another person or even teach it, and in class it is all good, and even teaching it, it is all fine, but outside the teaching process, outside the class, immediately what? The responses are performed according to my old habitual patterns. Meaning what? One then needs to go back and work thought by thought until the personality starts to transform. I say this again, there is no point of Vedanta or any subject matter unless it is transforming your life. And how is it supposed to transform your life? Being firm, decently, kindly, and gently firm onto yourself that I shall make this part of my personality. I shall live this in the light to inspire others and be a role model how to live a life of divinity. So this is your job. And how do we do this? Thought by thought. Quality time is invested. Otherwise, Vedanta becomes useless knowledge in a couple of years when the high of Vedanta drops away. We see this very often. It's all fine in class, but outside the class, what? Instantly the same reactions come. That means what? I need to then take more quality time throughout my day to think about what I've been learning. So what's the indicator this is not working? The summary is, in class I remember who I am and I have clarity. Ananda's there. When we go home, it disappears or the intensity changes. What does this mean? This means that one is still dependent conditionally, like the water, onto what? The self-knowledge to be at an intensity of its fullness. That means there's still a dependence. How do we solve this? Thought by thought, investigation, asking, why is it that this reduces? What is it about me? What obstacle is it in me that stops this fullness from being known unceasingly, even in my dreams? That is your job. Constantly asking. Why does this subside? What is it about me that reduces this knowledge once I am transacting with the world? And in what ways can I sustain, or what will I have to do to sustain this knowledge so it is unceasing, persistent, consistent? Now, again, nididhyasanam is when knowledge has been well ascertained and assimilated. Which means what? The teaching is not forgotten. Now I said the word assimilated. Assimilated has 3 layers. If there's one thing you need to note through the entire year, it is what I'm about to say, these 3 layers. Because these 3 layers of teaching is how the entire Vedanta process works. And if you can recognize where you are according to these 3 stages of knowledge, according to who I am and who I am not, then you know where you need to, or what you need to work on. Stage 1 says, I am not this body-mind complex. I am consciousness pervading this body-mind complex. I am Atman. I am not Anatman. I am the self. I am not the objects known to me, because the object and the subject can never be the same. I am the knower, not the known. I am Satyam, not Mithya. I am unchanging, independent, and not the changing, ever ongoing, depending, changing experiences. I am spirit, not matter. I am Dehi, the indweller in the body, and not Deha, the body itself. This is first level of teaching. The comparison, metaphorically, to this would be like this. The space in this room is other than the wall, is different from the wall. And not only is it other than the wall, the space is confined in this room. In other words, stage 1 says consciousness inheres in this body. That's stage 1. We're only at stage 1. In other words, stage 1 is knowing the difference between Satya Mithya. From the beginning, since last year, I've only been covering stage 1. Stage 1 is chapter 1 to 6, stage 2 is 7 to 12, stage 3 is 12 to 18. Stage 2, do you know what stage 1 is now? So stage 1 is consciousness is what? Confined in this body. I am not the body, I am consciousness pervading this body. Stage 2, I, consciousness, not only pervade this body-mind complex, but I pervade every single body-mind complex. I pervade everybody. The equivalent metaphor to this would be the space in this room not only is contained in this room, but the very space in this room is also the very space in every other room in this house. That means the space in that room, in that body, is not different than the space in this room, in this body. In other words, the consciousness which I inhere and pervade this body is the same consciousness that pervades and inheres in every single other body, in the entire world, of every single jiva. That's the second level of teaching. In other words, the second level is the consciousness that I am, Atman, is not different than the consciousness that you are. We are one and the same consciousness. So stage 1 was what? I am consciousness pervading this body. Stage 2 is what? The consciousness that I am pervading this body is the same consciousness that is pervading your body. This is stage 2. Now, chapter 12 to 18 is stage... Okay, before I go there, which means what? Until I pose a question at the end of the class, demonstrate for me the logical fallacies of saying my consciousness is different from your consciousness. Remember that? Okay, if you do, it doesn't really matter. We will go through that between chapters 7 and 12. Now, the last stage, 12 to 18, Bhagavad Gita, says, I am not in everybody. You see how we just negated stage 1 and 2? 1 and 2 was, I'm in this body, I'm in everyone's body. Now stage 3 is saying, I'm not in everybody. But everybody is in me. All bodies are in me. There is only me here. And all else is just appearance, which is also me. My Maya is demonstrating this wonderful world to me, myself, Brahman. The equivalent of this would be to say, the space in these rooms are not only in these rooms, but actually these rooms are in the one same space. Every single room is accommodated by the one same space. The entire cosmos, the entire universe is pervaded in and through by the one same self, you. There is only me here. So what does this mean in practice? The answer is, do not, under any circumstances, move from 1 to 2 unless you are completely certain that you know the difference between changing and unchanging. Because by the time we get to chapter 7, which is going to come up very soon, if you don't know the difference between changing and unchanging, then you got about 3 weeks to work extremely hard to figure it out. What is the unchanging? That principle which, listen, is the same in all three states, meaning what? The past, the present, and the future. What is the unchanging? That principle which is the same in all three states, meaning what? The waking, the dreaming, and the deep sleep. What is unchanging? That principle which gets to recognize by the witnessing of your picture as a 5-year-old child, and you go, oh, how cute was I? From that standpoint, you know the body is totally different than the body now, and yet you recognize there is some connecting principle that makes you recognize that you were still there in that body as a 5-year-old, and you are still there from these eyes from a 30, 40, 50-year-old looking at that little body of a 5-year-old. That unchanging principle which recognized yourself as a 2, 4, 5, 10-year-old and a 20-year-old is that unchanging principle. And what is the changing? Very easy. Anything that comes and goes. Clear? Yeah. Super. So what are we saying? Well ascertained knowledge, the complete totality teaching of this means I never forget number 3, stage number 3. That means all that is here is me. Stage number 1 is still Advaita. We cannot go around the world consistently saying this is the world and this is me. That's the object, I'm the subject. That's the known, I'm the knower. That is a very high teaching, but it's not the end. That's partial. One has to ascertain that all here is one without the second, and I'm not excluded from that one. So, when no problems... Okay, question. When do you invest in your bank account? When do you put money in your bank account? Do you put money in your bank account during the time when everything is okay, or in crisis? Huh? No, you put money when everything's okay. And what do you do during crisis? You take out the money which you were putting with struggle, consistent, persistent effort, and when it's most needed, I then borrow the money which I put. In the same manner, when do you do Nididhyasanam? When everything's sparkly, super rainbowy, moonlight shining, cakes everywhere in your life, or when everything's falling apart? Huh? When everything's rainbowish. That's exactly when you do your Nididhyasanam. So, what is money in your bank account? Nididhyasanam. So what does this mean? I inquire into thought by thought into the nature of the self when everything's super perfect. When there's no reason to inquire, that's exactly when I inquire. When it's only worthy of going to a holiday, enjoying oneself, that's exactly when to inquire. Why? Because then during the time of crises in life or hardships, especially when the body gets older, then I can easily relax and draw from my Nididhyasanam account. That way, one is consistently what? Established in the self. Because what's the point of Nididhyasanam? To ascertain the knowledge of the self. Okay. What does this mean? Once again, one needs to saturate themselves in the knowledge of the self. And how do you get saturated in anything? By absorbing yourself in that subject matter. How does a person get good at anything? By absorbing themselves in the topic matter. How does one get saturated in self-knowledge? By spending quality time in self-knowledge. Solid quality time. Which means what? The more I invest during rainbowish times, the more I can draw. Draw where? Worldly transactions. What does this mean? Worldly transactions which otherwise pull me out of myself can no longer do that. Why? Because one's bank account is full. Okay, verse 29. Sarvabhutastamatmanam sarvabhutani chatmani ikshate yoga yuktatma sarvatra samadarshanaha. One whose mind is disciplined through meditation perceives the Atma in all beings and all beings in the Atma. You see, it's not a one-way thing. I don't just perceive Atma in you and all beings in the Atma. He has the same vision everywhere. So, yoga yukt Atma, which means, so one is disciplined or, okay, why is one disciplined? Because they are saturated in the knowledge of the subject matter being entertained. For example, whatever field of knowledge you are absorbed in, as I said in the previous verse, you are what? Absorbed in that subject matter. For example, a musician is what? Absorbed in music. So a musician interprets the world how? Generally, according to notes. So even a baby crying, a musician will probably interpret ma pa no ma si ho he, or something like that. Okay? So to a musician, the world, which is value neutral by the way, gets interpreted according to the eyes of musical notes. For a scientist, for example, Newton, he's sitting under a tree and an apple falls. What would an ordinary human person do if an apple falls? Eat the apple. Why? Because the ordinary person is established in what? Food. Thus, they naturally respond according to what they are established in. But what was Isaac Newton? A lifelong scientist. Thus, even something as mundane as an apple falling off a tree gets interpreted according to the laws of physics, the laws of nature, and thus gets named gravity. So this means even an innocent apple falling, which we would all eat gladly, gets converted into the field of endeavor for a scientist according to the knowledge of universe. In the same manner, a Vedantin who is absorbed in the knowledge of the self interprets the world how? As myself alone. How does a scientist interpret the world? Law 1, Law 2, Law 3, Law 4, electromagnetism, gravity, velocity, speed, wind, power, so on. What pervades every single law in the universe? The one same substratum upon which all the laws depend on. Which is why in chapter 7, Krishna is going to say to Arjuna, I will now teach you knowledge, knowing which, and after which known, there is nothing else to be known. In other words, meaning what? Once the knowledge of the self, that which is the whole, and upon which nothing is excluded from, is well ascertained and established, then what is there to know and what is there to interpret other than myself? Because I am not apart from the self. You see the logic? Thus, what happens? The seeking stops. The mystery stops. And what starts when the mystery stops? Appreciation, gratitude, wonder, how beautiful all this is. And I'm not apart from the beauty that I happen to be appreciating. Okay, now, so in this case, yukta means absorbed in self-knowledge. That's the summary. And because of what? Why is one absorbed in the subject matter? Because of constant absorption, constant persistence regarding the subject matter. So how does one get absorbed? How do you get absorbed in yourself? Persistent, flooding oneself with what? Knowledge received in the class or through the Shastra. How do you do this? By taking one statement that is pertinent, relevant to you, and seeing what the meaning is for yourself. In other words, you're what? Giving quality time. And this person whose mind is established in the self has what? Benefit. Benefit being sukham uttamam. Contentment which no other worldly contentment can match. Now, Samadarshanam, the last word. Samadarshanam means what? Sarvatra, everywhere. Samadarshana means everywhere is the same vision. Sama, same, darshanam, vision. Same vision of what? That all that is here is one without a second. And how does one gain this Samadarshanam, vision of oneness? By constantly, persistently dwelling upon Atma, upon the knowledge of the self. There is no other way. So this means what? Even when such person interacts with the world, does Samadarshanam expire or change in intensity? No. Why? Because the world is not apart from the whole. And I, the witness, am not apart from the whole. It is all self alone. In the same manner, such a person who has taken the time to dwell and be absorbed in this knowledge cannot get out of this vision of oneness, because it's well ascertained, well assimilated. And this person, called a jnani, we're speaking about a jnani now, has vision of what? Oneness, which means what? I see the commonality that pervades all things. And that commonality is Chaitanyam Swarupa, the nature of consciousness. Just like, for example, the one invisible thread, which what? Links all of the beads together. What do we see? The beads alone. Do we see the thread? No. And yet all of those beads representing what? The entire cosmos are all combined, all held together by what? That one invisible thread. No wonder it is hard to appreciate Ishvara, because we cannot see that which holds everything together. Thus, such a person with Samadarshanam, Sarvatra, everywhere, has such vision of oneness. What does this mean? I understand that that one thread which connects us all together, I can never be away from. Because the fact that I am witnessing you means what? I am part of the one same totality. This also does not mean that he or she, that means a jnani, a wise person who has well ascertained this knowledge through quality time, it does not mean they do not see differences. Because we think a liberated person now only sees somehow oneness everywhere. No. Differences are still seen. Empirical, transactional, vyavaharika differences are still observed. However, the differences are known to be what? All pervaded by the one same thread, which is Chaitanyam Swarupa, the nature of consciousness. It's just like, for example, what does a wise person see? Vision of oneness. What does this mean? Imagine you have ornaments, and you have a nice bangle, nice necklace, nice earring. A bangle, necklace, and an earring have completely different functions. Totally different functions. They have no relation to each other. So this means what? They all have different personalities. They all have different functions in the world. This is called swadharma. What is your swadharma? You're an earring. Someone else here is a bangle. Someone else is an earring. So we all contribute to the totality. And yet, every single ornament is what? Of the same one gold. In other words, the functions are different, the appearances are different, the expressions are different, and yet, despite the differences, they are of the one same nature, which none are different or apart from. And myself as an earring and yourself as a bangle, we may have different functions in terms of gender, in terms of our time on earth, and yet we are all of the same one limitless gold, Brahman. So this is a vision of a wise person. What's the vision of a wise person? My focus is addressing the differences, no doubt, and yet despite the differences, I see what? The sameness in all things. So, once again, what does such a person see? A jnani sees Atma residing in all living things. Atma is who you are, thus you are residing as consciousness in all forms, just like the ornaments. The same goal that inheres in me also inheres in every single other individual. So this also means such a person can appreciate the space in one room and also recognize that that's one space is in what? Every single other room. You're one room, someone else is another room. The differences are different because every room has different pictures, different personality. And yet every room is hosted and supported by what? The space. So the space in me is not different than the space in you. This is the vision of oneness. Vision of oneness does not mean that I physically see only one. I fully see differences, and yet because of one's understanding, simultaneously I see gold in everyone. And also that one space is what? Not only pervading this room, not only all the rooms within the space, but what? The entire planets, galaxies, universes are what? All in the one single space. So it doesn't matter where you talk about different dimensions, different realities, or this humble reality called Earth, Mother Gaia, it is all what? Contained in the one same space. In the same way, not only is the space itself contained in consciousness, but consciousness is as the space. Consciousness is as the space through its power of Maya. So all that is here is one without a second. A wise person also does not mix their channels. There are two channels only. Did you know that? Atma channel, Anatma channel. Anatma channel is the channel of the unchanging. Atma channel is the unchanging channel. Anatma channel, you have a lot of good entertainment, a lot of good variety in this channel. So a wise person fully makes use of Anatma channel when it's time to what? Have variety. And makes use of Atma channel and never loses track of the Atma channel despite watching the Anatma channel when what? He or she wishes to abide in eternal security. Because that's what we all want, security, freedom. Can you find security, freedom in the Anatma channel? No way. Because Anatma channel is only going to give security for a short time. Where is security found? In you alone, in the self. Which means one can enjoy variety. At the same time, one never loses track of the Atma channel. And that channel is where permanence resides. Permanence of what? Security, cheerfulness, peace, contentment. The greatest human tragedy during our birth is to look for peace, contentment in what? Anatma channel. Because we're offered ourselves, assuming you undergo a class, undergo the knowledge, and yet we constantly put our peace and joy in the channel of Anatma. So a jnani never loses track that the only security I can ever find, true security, is in myself. Because even the closest people to me will go. Even this body, which I'm using what? To gain security from the world, is going to expire and is going to age in such a manner that it can no longer extract the same security and enjoy the same security as it once did as a youngling, as a youngster. So, where is eternal security? In the Atma or Anatma channel? Yeah, you know the answer. And how does one gain this benefit? Finally, through Vedantic Nididhyasanam alone. Constant, unceasing, quality time investment in yourself. There's no other way. So we have to be realistic about this. Sarve bhavantu sukhinaha, sarve santu niramaya, sarve bhadrani pashyantu, ma kaschit dukkha bhag bhavet. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.